great, Lee, that you've been able to join us this lunchtime for another of our Lunch and Learns. Lee from Meta Eagle. Good afternoon, Lee. How are you?
Good afternoon, Steve. I'm very well, thank you. And thanks for having me back. It's good to see you again.
It's good to have you as part of the Action Coach family doing these Lunch and Learns. And we never quite know who's going to be joining us, but we are broadcasting this lunchtime on 3 platforms. We're on Zoom. We've got a number of people registered on Zoom and joining us on that platform. We're also going live on Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you're listening to us on either of the social media platforms, please do put your comments and your questions in the comments box. My colleague Pam is sitting in the background and she will just monitor and we sort of feed those into either Lee or myself this lunchtime. If you're on Zoom, please use the Q&A or the chat box. It'd be great to have you asking questions as we go through. But just to introduce it a bit more formally, so Lee from Meta Eagle, it's great to have you with us. We're going to be talking about all things IT this lunch, aren't we, Lee, and keeping it really simple.
Indeed.
So Lee, do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do at Meta Eagle?
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Lee Robinson. I'm one of the co-founders and directors at Meta Eagle. So I've been in the IT space for quite a long period of time. I'm definitely older than what I look, so about 20 years in industry. And we're a relatively new company, and 2020 being the challenging year that it is, it's certainly seen a huge demand in cloud computing and the ability to be able to work adaptively. So it's been an incredibly busy year for us.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a really, really challenging year for everybody in terms of their IT, and I'm sure, sort of looking at how they use IT and how that can support their business in a very different way over the last 12 months has been, it's great to have the likes of yourself and other organizations as well, the supporting industry to making sure we can keep our IT infrastructure going. And we'll come on to that, I'm sure, in a moment. But you say you're older than you look. I'm definitely younger than I look. I'll go the other way. And I'm definitely not the 43 that I feel sometimes. But anyway, it's good to have you with us. For those of you with us for the first time this lunchtime, I say please put the questions and answers in the Q&A box. What we would really encourage you to do this lunchtime, as either myself or Lee are sharing a bit about IT and having this conversation, is just to think about what you can get out of your learning. And I do encourage, as I say to all my clients on our Lunch and Learn sessions and all other sessions, is try and move beyond the I know. Try and banish that from your mind this lunchtime and every moment going forwards and think, isn't that interesting? Because I can guarantee, and I may have said this to you before, Lee, that the words I know are the most expensive words in business. People think they know better than the professionals. They think they know something and therefore close their mind down. And we talk about Christmas earlier on, Lee, and our kids. My kids are 9 and they are experts at saying, Daddy, I know. Because they think they know how to turn the remote control on the TV, or they know how to do something else on the iPad. And before I can even start showing them, they're there, experts. And I think we all do that even into an older age. Myself older than you, Lee, but we sort of do it a bit more politely. We sort of cross our arms and we think, oh yes, I know what Lee's going to say now, so I'm going to switch off. Well, I encourage you to keep listening, because I know that Lee has got things that are going to help us all with our IT and in every aspect of our business. And it's absolutely what we learn after we think we know it all that really counts. And so I'd really encourage you to listen and to ask questions and to interrogate Lee, and I'm sure he'll be able to give lots of useful hints and tips on IT this afternoon, because ultimately what we're trying to do is create some BFOs. What's a BFO, Lee? It's a blinding flash of the obvious. It's that light bulb moment where our conversation, the information that Lee's going to share this lunchtime, and we'll probably connect bits of information you may well have already known, but it's about connecting it together, a bit like a circuit board, and suddenly that light bulb goes off and think, yes, I can do that in my business. So Lee, we're really looking forward to what you've got to share with us this afternoon. I know you want to share your screen with a few slides, don't you?
Indeed,
absolutely,
yeah, please.
About keeping IT simple. And I think we're going to cover everything from, how we can keep our data secure, to backing up, to simplifying remote access, etc. But Lee, I'll hand over to you, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions coming in as we go through.
Right, okay. So while I'm sharing my screen, what I'm just going to say is, going back to the blinding flash of the obvious, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be going through is not anything too difficult. Some of it is quite simple, but I guarantee that there'll be people that won't be adhering to certain elements of it. So without spoiling the preview, hopefully you should be able to see my screen okay now.
I absolutely can. It's brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Lee.
There we go. How about that for multitasking, eh? So, right, okay. let's begin. So simplifying IT, this is going to be a quick 10-minute presentation. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, but hopefully it'll be delivering some useful content for you all. So as Steve said, Meta Eagle, we're an IT consultancy company. We're based in the center of Birmingham, relatively new and exciting. And what we've been doing is collaborating with many different manufacturers in order to be able to offer comprehensive IT solutions, a one-stop shop, if you will. Our motto is more than technology. So what we do is we aim to understand an organization so that we can provide an IT solution that's going to suit the business. There are a lot of companies that are able to deliver IT support, but I think understanding your clients and what they do and what's unique to them only allows you to develop better solutions. And also as well, we like to understand where the business is going, because there's no point designing a solution for the here and now if it's going to impede business growth going forward. So we have some strategic partnerships with some of the biggest vendors out there, such as Microsoft, Cisco, Meraki, HP Business, and it's vendors that we work with for a long time, and I've worked for a long time throughout my career. So more information about us and what we do is available on our website, and I'll make that available to you at the end of the presentation.
That's great. Thanks, Lee. Oh, 4 questions. Go on, hit us with them.
So the 4 questions, and these are just very simple IT questions that I'm going to ask to help you simplify IT. So in regards to understanding your IT needs, you need to be asking these questions, and then hopefully, if you're able to answer them, you'll be able to achieve somewhat of an IT Zen. Okay, so before we jump in, I want to start with a story. So President John F. Kennedy was visiting NASA's headquarters for the first time in 1961. While touring the facility, he introduced himself to a janitor who was mopping the floor, and he asked him what he did at NASA. He replied, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Now, I love this quote. It's an example of everyone working together towards a common goal. As we know in business, it's important to have goals. It's a brilliant quote, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Everyone's there, from the engineers to the janitor, the catering staff, everyone in between. They are going towards that common goal. And we all have goals and visions and strategies in business. And it's important that we have everyone within our organization working towards those goals.
Absolutely.
From the managing director to the apprentice, everyone needs to be striving to achieve the same objectives. If we don't have an understanding of our IT strategy, how can we and our staff be expected to achieve and be made sure that we're actually complying with it?
It's an important point, Lee. We talk a lot in Action Coach about goals and vision and mission for the business as a whole. But that really, it's a great point you're making. It really needs to be broken down into different sectors of the business. So, we talk about a marketing strategy. What is your IT strategy? Where is it you need to focus your IT, spend, I guess, in the business? Which areas are working really well? Which areas perhaps need to be improved? How do you need to adapt with the environment in which you're operating? All these questions, and it's about having a really clear vision and strategy for your IT, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, a vision and a mission, company ethos are all really important things for companies to have. And it's certainly worth taking the time deliberating over them and deciding what you as an organization want to do. So in terms of an IT strategy, I've just got some points there on the screen. So your strategy might be able to work from anywhere. As we said a little bit earlier on, that's been very prevalent this year. Companies that have been able to work from anywhere have not had a problem saying to employees, right, lockdown 1, lockdown 2.0, as it was, pack up your stuff, go home, you're working from home for a month. You might want your staff to be able to work from any device. One thing that we were very keen on when we started Meta Eagle was we didn't want to have to be tied to a desk. So whether it's a tablet, a phone, a laptop, we can pick a device up and simply just start working as if we were in the office. You may wish to automate repetitive business tasks. How many of us have particular tasks that we might do on a daily or even a weekly basis that are the same things in and out? A key example of that is we build a lot of machines, as you'd expect, from servers to laptops and desktops. Well, we don't sit in front of every machine and build them. We've got an automation process where the machines will talk to a build server that we have. It will deploy the image and all the applications that that particular customer needs, encrypt the hard drive, deploy antivirus, and then we'll just do a bit of quality control checking at the end before it goes back in the box and gets shipped off to make sure that it's got everything that it needs. That for us in that example, it saves a lot of time that we can develop elsewhere, because rather than a machine taking an hour or 2 hours to build, it's taking us 15 minutes. And you think over the year how much time that allows us to save.
Absolutely, yeah. Many hours, I'm sure. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it definitely does, and it frees us up for lots of more exciting things like research and development. But
and in fact, we had Kaneo, a mutual friend of ours, with us last week, and he was talking about IT systemization. So it's taking your IT that next step further, thinking how can it work for you in the business, and again freeing up time and resource. So the staff, it's not about replacing people; it's about then freeing up their time to do other things in the business to use them more effectively. So and that will come back to having the great IT infrastructure in place in the first place.
Indeed, and you know what? At the end of the day, it's a simple fact of we need to be leveraging technology, because i.e. every business needs to be leveraging technology, not just MetaEagle, because if you don't do it, you can guarantee that your competition's going to do it, and they'll be able to operate with better margins, and they will be able to plow their additional time into research, development, marketing, or whatever it is they decide to do. So we've got to be utilizing technology to make sure that we remain competitive.
And Lee, I make you smile. I was talking to my parents the other day and saying, this time last year at Christmas, who would have known that next Christmas we'll be doing it over Zoom, doing birthday parties over Zoom, having many meetings over Zoom in the year, and it feels like we've all been catapulted forwards, a whole decade in terms of how, not just in business, but in life generally, we're all using IT in a much more focused and structured way. And you quite rightly say we need to keep on cutting edge of that to stay competitive. We're now using digital marketing far more than we've ever used before in the commercial sector, and we're using IT in a remote, to remotely manage and operate in terms of staffing, systemization, delivery, etc. of our business and our content. So it's really important we have the best systems in place.
Well, this is it, and you're entirely right about how the current climate has catapulted us, I reckon, to a decade in the future. A year ago, if I would have said to a client that we were going to have a call on Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts or whatever it is that you want to use, you'd get a bit of a funny look and, well, how do I do that? But you can guarantee now there's so many more people that are able to use video tech to have calls. And let's be honest, it saves on time. You're not having to commute to that customer meeting anymore. You're not having to take time out of your day to then commute back. So you're probably, for a meeting that lasts an hour, you're not eating up 3 hours, which is almost half a business day.
Absolutely.
You're able to maybe fit 2 meetings in rather than the one that you normally would, because you'd be sat in the car listening to your favorite podcasts or commuting back from wherever you were.
Yeah, no, right, it's certainly changed the way we work, hasn't it? And I think for the better, maybe in many ways, we given that the face-to-face is important, but and I think it's changed it long term. I don't think we're going to go back to the way we were. We're moving forwards now. We need to keep that in mind as we develop our IT systems in our businesses.
Definitely. So with that being the case, in terms of as business owners, directors, management, whoever really in a company, it's really important to know and understand where your data is held. And this leads us on to the first point, is where is your data stored? Guidelines and legislation such as GDPR mean that we must be controlling and acting on relevant data in a safe and secure manner that's also compliant. With technology available today, it may exist in more than one place and on more than one platform. It may exist on premise, and we've all seen the server rooms where you've got your physical servers, or perhaps even virtualized environments, but you know where it is. It's in your server room at the office.
I have to say, Lee, this looks like something out of Star Wars or something. These images.
So yeah, actually, those images. The one on the left is an infrastructure we built for a school, actually. So it's an example of some servers and a SAN, which is like a mass amount of disks for storage. And that hosts a virtualized system. So, but that is on premise at said school. And on the right-hand side is an example of a data center. So, and this is a common misconception that people sometimes have. The cloud, I don't know where the cloud is. It's up there somewhere, but no one really understands it. The cloud is simply just someone else's infrastructure. It's a data center somewhere else. And whoever it is that's managing the IT should be able to tell you at least the geographic location of where that data is. Because even in the example of Microsoft Azure, you're still able to dictate where that data is held, or what region. So is it in the UK? Is it in the US, East Coast, West Coast? You're still able to dictate that and have that element of control. You may, as well as having on-premise or cloud, you may have what's known as a hybrid solution, where some services are on-premise, perhaps there's applications that have to be run from premise servers on-site, and they may be well mixed in with cloud elements, such as email might be in Microsoft 365, for example. So it's just not necessarily understanding the technical ins and outs of how it works, but I think we all have a duty of care to understand where that data is, i.e. our email solutions in the cloud, but our ERP software is run on a server, which is on the server room on the first floor, for example.
Lee, I've got a question from Simon, who's listening intently, which is good to have you with us this lunchtime, Simon. And he's asking, he said there's been a lot of high profile cases of the data being hacked from cloud sources. Is it better to have it sort of physically backed up in the office, or is it better to have it in cloud storage? What are the pros and cons?
So I'm going to give a real world scenario. Actually, I can't name any company names for obvious reasons.
Yes.
But I was employed to go and do some consultancy for a client in terms of the data that they had on premise. So we went there, we discussed their IT systems, and they were relatively secure. They had business grade firewalls, everything was relatively up to date, their servers were quite new, they'd spent quite a lot of money on the technical aspect. But the spanner that I threw into the room was the server room was on the outskirts of the building. And I posed a simple question of, if I really wanted to take your data, what's to stop me plowing a truck through that door? It's like a PVC door. It wouldn't have been too difficult to get into. Picking the server up, putting it in the back of the truck and driving off. And they simply hadn't thought of that. So in a data center, your data is far more secure. You've got perimeter security, you've got 24/7 surveillance, you've got security site that are on site constantly, fire suppression systems, power redundancy. So let's be honest, data is breachable wherever it might be, on site or in a data center in the cloud. However, I would say physical security, definitely way more secure in a data center. And if it can be breached in a data center, there's no reason why it can't be breached on premise. I mean, yes, you're going to hear more about various cloud products being breached because it makes good news. But the only way you're going to have a system that is unbreachable is if it's what we call air-gapped. So if it's not connected to the internet and you've got physical security in and out of that room. But in today's day and age, that's just not practical. I'd say 99% of the systems you have to have connected to the internet.
For the likes of myself, who aren't quite as technically knowledgeable as yourself, Lee, when you say air gaps, you mean things like such as memory sticks, etc., where there's a physical gap between the storage and the device.
So a prime example of something being air gapped is I know that there's a lot of applications in government departments where they have particular things running on machines that are not connected to any form of network. They're not connected to the internet in any way, shape or form. So therefore, it's the only way you're going to breach that system is to physically be in front of that computer. So an air gap system simply means that data that is not connected in any shape or form to a network, whether it is a USB stick in a safe, whether it's a computer that's under armed guard and and hidden away in a room somewhere in a basement.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen high profile stories of memory sticks and all sorts being found on underground stations and
being left on trains, and
etc. Yes, yeah. So having it backed up in somewhere like this is crucial.
But that leads very nicely into the next topic of discussion, which is data breaches.
There we go. As if I'd seen your presentation before, Lee.
Is it? Yeah, it's as if you knew, Steve. Brilliant. And that leads very, very well into Simon's question there, is knowing where our data is, we can ask ourselves is how is it kept secure? Because that is incredibly crucial. And just to give you some example of the stats there, that 76%, sorry, of breaches have occurred due to weak or stolen credentials. I mean, how many times have we seen in offices, and I see this, where people write down credentials on a post-it note and it's stuck to monitors, or I've been to sites before where people have literally printed off a label with the admin password to the server and stuck it on the server. The first thing I did was to remove that sticker and take it with me. Yeah, so we've got to be really conscious of how we're storing our credentials. 52% of the time it's come down to hacking. 40% of occurrences have occurred due to malware. Now, this obviously isn't the totality of 100%. This is each case looked at case by case.
Yes, yeah.
And malware is been more prevalent in the news, especially with the CryptoLocker viruses that are out, started coming out about 3-4 years ago, where systems have been breached simply because whoever it is has accepted an email, they've clicked on a link, it's downloaded some malicious code and maybe encrypted their files. I mean, we saw it with various, I've got to be careful what I say here in case anyone comes after me, various companies and large public sector elements getting breached in this manner. Some of them occur due to like social tactics and social breaching. So it may not well be anything too technical. And it's an element I find fascinating, actually. Human engineering. Humans are the weakest point in an IT system. And
well, it just leads me on to make a comment, because I know we've got one of our other Lunch and Learn panelists listening, Claire Lawton, who's an HR expert, and I'm sure she will say make sure you've got an adequate data policy, IT policy in your organization, all your staff are aware, because as you say, humans are the weakest link. So it's about making sure in your organization you've both got the structure and the infrastructure, but also the policies and procedures in place, I guess, as well, Lee.
Yeah, definitely. And they're really important. You wouldn't hire someone without an employment contract about how much they're going to get paid and the hours you'd expect them to work. Well, an IT policy is exactly the same. If you're not dictating as to where data should be stored for your customers, for example, how can we then say that, one, we can deliver adequate training to that member of staff to make sure they're complying, and two, in the event that there was a breach, that it was due to them not complying? Because if those policies don't exist, then it's unfair of us to expect that from said member of staff. And social engineering is absolutely brilliant. I've been involved in roles before of going into a company and obtaining data which was completely lawful. It was contracted by senior management and directors of said firm. And it simply happens by people are inherently polite. The amount of times I've managed to get into a building because someone's held a door open for me because I'm a few feet behind them, or you're in the breakout area in the outside of the building and you manage to tailgate someone in. We all do it because people are inherently polite, and it's so easy to be able to get access to a system or a building purely based on the human aspect rather than the technical aspect.
Yeah, and I guess, well, I know I've been commuting in and out of Birmingham many times, and sitting on the trains, and you can hear people, you listen to people, and if you wanted to, you could sort of look over somebody's shoulder and see everything on their screen at any one time. Data is so easy to obtain if you had a mindset to do so. So we've got to be so careful, haven't we, Lee, in terms of how we handle data and how we keep it secure.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And that's why we need to make sure that, as you said, Steve, we've got these policies in place, IT policies, password policies. We might want to dictate that passwords are changed every X period of time. And we also want to make sure that we've got good management of that information, i.e., I ask everyone in terms of password management, if you're not using a password manager, I really do encourage you to go and use one. There's several good examples out there on the internet. And the amount of times I've seen passwords jotted down in Word documents, Excel documents, a little black book that someone keeps in their top drawer is unreal. The next factor is 2FA. So 2FA is two-form factor authentication. So traditionally, and this has been the case for some time, is that to gain access to a system, you will enter a username and you'll enter a password. So that's one set of information you've got, i.e. the login credentials. 2FA uses a second element of authentication. So it could be anything from a hardware token to a mobile phone. And what that means is to get access to that system, not only do you need to know the username and the password, but you've also got to have access to that hardware device, that token, that phone.
I guess the example that most of us will be familiar with is that all of us who are doing online banking will have to have some sort of ID response before we can log in.
Yeah.
So we usually have to get that from another device, whether it be our mobile phone or a little SIMS card or something. We'll all have to do that. And that is 2FA, isn't it? That's two-factor authentication.
It is. I was just looking to see if I've got one to hand, which I think I have. It's we'll cover up the banks now, but yeah, we're all familiar with these that we have to use in order to put our card in and authenticate who we are, that we are who we say we are, and log in. It's a form of 2FA. So why are we not employing that on IT systems such as remote servers or email solutions? Well, we should be. A lot of them do offer these 2FA solutions, so there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. So password policies, password protection, make sure we're documenting them. 2FAs also a factor, but we also need to consider our endpoints. And endpoints is a term bantered around a lot in the IT industry. Endpoint is simply a machine that you're using. It could be a PC, desktop, laptop. It could even be a mobile phone or a tablet. So in order to protect these endpoints, we've got to make sure that they're patched and they're up to date. We've got to make sure that there's antivirus on them. We need to make sure that we're monitoring for threat detection using EDR, so endpoint detection. We've got to be monitoring everything, and we've got to make sure our network's secure. So all of our network devices.
It's probably even harder now, Lee, in terms of where people are working. Well, certainly over the last 12 months, people have been working much more in remote locations. We're dispersed. We're not all sort of centrally based in an office. Or I know that I'm not, for example. And I'm an example of many around the country that are working remotely from home on a regular basis. Maybe not full time, but certainly on a regular basis. And it's about making sure that whatever software, hardware we're using, we've got the right software securing that hardware to avoid this breach.
Indeed. And it is a lot easier if you're using company-owned devices, because the company can dictate the policies that said devices need to adhere to. Not that we'll dictate to people how their IT policy should be, but personally, if people are using their own devices, and bring your own devices increasingly common in today's age, even more so in 2020, then there needs to be some form of control and management on said device. So whether it's the company has a policy in place to say, right, you can use your own device, but we need to install our remote monitoring and management agent so we can make sure that it's compliant, then a lot of companies are choosing to do that. In fact, we work with some very secure industries that dictate if people are working from home, then they will be using a dedicated internet connection with a firewall provided by the company. And that will connect them in a manner that is secure to the rest of the IT systems. So they've got a second network, if you will. So they're not able to connect, any of their smart devices or smart assistants or cameras or anything like that to that little network. It's simply there for their laptop and for them to do their job. They've got a separate internet connection for all their home stuff and their smart connected fridge and everything else. So certainly easier to control in a managed environment, such as a corporate headquarters. We can monitor all of the networking devices. We can make sure that they're patched, the firmware's up to date, and everything else, because you really are as secure as the weakest element of your network.
And I guess just going back to a couple of comments, really, one from Jazzy, but I'll come back to Jazzy in a minute. But in terms of password policies and passwords generally, we're coming to a time when people are perhaps, well, I genuinely hope that people are going to be switching off for a good week, 10 days for the festive period.
Hopefully.
I'm presuming that's when people come back after the Christmas break, and like any holiday, oh, what was my password before I left? It's that sort of, it's about making sure that we're switching off properly and securing our data, and making sure we've got that password ready for when we get back as well. So some sort of way of registering your passwords, as you said, in other using other software, password secure. I can't remember the phrase you used, Lee. Sort of a software.
It's simply a password management system. So a good example of one is LastPass. If you go to lastpass.com, you're able to sign up for an account, which I believe is still free. They offer a paid version, which is very, very inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. And the paid version will allow you to put an element of 2FA, two-form factor authentication, on it, but it's a way of securing all of your credentials. So I'd employ anyone to just do that for their own password management, their own personal stuff. In regards to the business and storing credentials for the business, then really you need to be adhering to hopefully a policy that's been put in place by whoever runs the IT. We've got a bespoke tool that we use that's incredibly secure, as you'd expect, because we have credentials for many different customers. In fact, the last I looked, we had 16,000 sets of credentials in there, which, unless you're in our office and have various passwords, and I think we've got four form factor authentication, which is ridiculous, but we have to keep it secure. And if we can retain and maintain 16,000 sets of credentials, then there's no reason why anyone from a firm is not able to document and know their own passwords.
So there's a couple of comments. So Claire is back with Claire about talking about policies earlier on, but said it may be a great time over Christmas to refresh all passwords. What's your thoughts on that, Lee?
I would say potentially when people come back. Inherently, making a change when people aren't available always leads to bad things. I mean, if we make a change on a system, we won't do it on a Friday night, unless the situation absolutely dictates that it must, because on a Saturday morning, there's going to be no one available. So perhaps it might be New Year, new start, so week 1 in January.
Maybe what Claire was thinking, yes.
Yeah. So in that case, Claire, that would be a great idea. Really, you should be looking to change passwords every 3 months or so. And there's no reason why on systems you can't dictate that these passwords must be changed. Email systems, a Windows domain and network, you can write policies that force people to change their password every X period of time. So definitely encourage people to do that, and also make sure that people aren't using the same password for various different systems, because we've all been guilty of it. And there's been breaches out there that I can guarantee some of those passwords will be contained within, and people are opportunists. So the opportunist hacker will give it a go, and why make yourself an easy target?
Absolutely. And so Jasvir, sorry to keep you waiting. You had a question earlier on. So Jasvir was asking, what else can she do to make sure that only the right people are accessing her systems? And is there any way of checking who has accessed, so she can identify any unauthorized access?
So yeah, there is ways to see who access systems and when. One of the 2 form factor methods that we use, it actually documents an audit trail that can't be changed. We can't even change it. That dictates when someone's accessed the system, when they logged on, date and time, geographic area of where they logged on from. So yes, it can definitely be done, and it's definitely worthwhile doing to have that audit trail and that log. Again, going back to password management, the systems that we use, again, is all audited and documented. So at any point, I can pull a report to see what employee has access to what information. So let's say, for example, that employee was to leave, I would know all the passwords that we'd need to change. it all focuses through a central hub. So we can revoke access to that, for example. They won't be able to access anything, which means we've got a clear and coherent list of who knows what. And there is a lot of companies out there that don't necessarily have that information. So it's about putting the correct systems in place, which at the beginning is a bit of work to do, but once they're in place, it makes everything easier going forward.
You touched there on the on when when people leave, and I think that's another point that often is for some people a bit of a time of not wanting to cause offence on either side, depending on why the person's left, of course. But assuming people have left of their own fruition and it's all on good terms, there's often that case where people don't want to necessarily switch off the IT straight away, want to give them time to finish off. But I think absolutely, my view is to avoid data breach, it's really important that when somebody leaves, on the day they're leaving, you close down the systems and make sure that person
100%. The last before I started Meta Eagle, the firm I worked at, I left on incredibly good terms, and I knew as soon as I walked out the door, I would not have access to anything at all, because the policy was, as soon as you leave, all of your system access is revoked, and it's the way that it should be. You don't want, even if it is on good terms, you don't want to run the risk, and you don't want the ambiguity as well. Me as someone that was leaving, I didn't want to have any ambiguity of could I or couldn't I access something. So a blanket blockout is the way to go, even if it is on those good terms, and even more important if it's not so good terms, and someone is dismissed or asked to leave, then we definitely need to make sure that we're revoking access to everything IT related.
Yes, it's all part of that professional approach to, sort of removing any risk. And I think, as Claire's just said, removing any temptation on anybody's part, professional ending of that access. And if somebody does need access for something, there are still channels, I'm sure, in any organization where they can approach the right people via an HR department or via a management structure to access and to have that conversation. But, it's about removing that ambiguity, isn't it? And making sure you end the relationship professionally and in the right way.
Yeah, indeed.
But ultimately, as we talked about here, securing the data.
Well, this is it. And this is something that you should have as part of your IT policy. Yeah, you should have a new starter process. So if someone starts, you need to get them a phone or a laptop, and you need to register them in certain systems. You should have exactly the same policies for when someone leaves. They hand their phone back, they hand their laptop back. The laptop's kept for 3 months, for example, in case there's data that needs to be retrieved off of it that maybe that individual has. And they're locked out of all the systems that they would normally access. And as you said, Steve, there's always a way to give snippets of information or access to systems if there is, and sometimes there is, a justifiable need, but it should go through the correct channels.
Yeah. And just coming back to the slide on the screen in terms of endpoint protection, Lee, there are going to be many people out there. I mean, I'm one of them. I've not been back into the main office for some time, and my equipment is down here in my home. How can we as employers make sure that our equipment and our employees are protected from any sort of, IT challenges, data breaches, virus, etc. Are there any great tips and hints you can give us just to make sure that we are all keeping our data secure and virus protected?
Well, yeah. So firstly, let's start with the individual responsibility. So what we're all able to do is we're able to make sure our machines are up to date. So if we're using Windows, for example, we can, in the search box, type in Windows Update, or it'll pull up the Windows Update box. Is it fully up to date? Well, if it's not, let's get it up to date. The same with the antivirus. Hopefully everyone's got antivirus on their machine, irrespective of if you're using a Windows device or a Mac or Linux. I mean, it's a common misconception that you can't get viruses for Mac and Linux. Well, you can. It's just everyone tends to target Windows a little bit more because it's used more by the general populace. So we should all be taking responsibility and making sure we're keeping everything up to date ourselves. From a company perspective, we should have a way of centrally managing all of those machines. Even if it's an SME with perhaps half a dozen employees, we should have one panel where we can able to access and make sure all the machines are up to date. And so much so if it's a larger scale organization, because the more machines to manage, you're not necessarily going to be able to sit in front of every one of those machines. So we need a way to centrally control and manage them, including the antivirus and the patch management for them.
Brilliant. Some great ideas and tips there. Thanks, Lee. That's really helpful.
No problem. So the last the last question. So we've had the how is your data secured. So let's move on to what is the contingency and the disaster recovery plan. So one of the most crucial things that you can do is to have a practiced and well-defined, reliable disaster recovery plan. So the slide on the left, the giant fireball inferno, is, I'm not sure those amongst us that remember the Bunsfield Oil Depot, which I think was 2003, 2004 in Hemel Hempstead.
Yes.
So I used to work for a haulage company, and this was one of my first jobs in IT. And luckily, first and foremost, no one was hurt or killed. It was in the early hours of a weekend morning, thank God. But the Bunsfield Oil Depot exploded and took a lot of the industrial estate with it. So this was an accident that had nothing to do with the firm that I worked with at the time. We were just misfortunate enough to be across the street. And it, as you can see, it engulfed everything, absolutely engulfed everything. What was massively important is that there was the disaster recovery plan there and in place in order to allow the business to continue. I mean, could you imagine if all the data was held on site? We couldn't go back to that site for months because of pollution, because of fire, because of health and safety risks. At that time, I had actually left the organization, but prior to then, we were very well drilled into us by the technical director about having a contingency and a plan.
So important.
It is. And not only is it important to have a backup on site, so a near side backup, but you've got to make sure that you've got a contingency off site as well. So in case of a natural disaster or a fire or anything that's outside of the normal realms of control, there is that contingent. So
it's always that what if, isn't it, Lee? Always ask yourself what if, and make sure you've got the right systems and the right protection in place.
Indeed.
And I guess that sort of comes back to the question we were talking about earlier on, the pros and cons of online backup versus cloud backup. If that was an online backup sitting in the same buildings as perhaps your IT or your organization, then it's going to go up in flames with the rest of the company.
Well, this is it. And what we tend to do in industry is have a near side backup, excuse me, which is there in the server room. And the reason why we do that, it allows quicker restores. So if we need to restore anything, all the data's there, great, we can just crack on and do that. But then we also should have a secondary offsite backup, whether it's offsite in one location or perhaps even two locations, depending on your data. So we've got to make sure that we've got that contingent in there. Just on backups. Simon was asking, how often should we back up our systems, Lee? Is there a recommendation? Should it be once a year, once a month, once a week, daily? It should be backing up daily. We should be backing it up daily, and we should be backing it up multiple times a day. So to give you an example, the product we offer, Meta Backup, is something that we've taken with one of our vendors, and we've customized it slightly to work how we want it to. And the days of plugging in USB hard drives and backing up to that and giving it to Margaret in accounts to take home are well and truly over. I mean, when I was working in this industrial estate, bearing in mind this was 15 years ago, so it's quite some time ago, the process was we'd back up to tapes, and the on-call engineer of the week would take the tapes home with them, so that they're at home. But bearing in mind, this is in the day with 56K modems and ISDN, and that's pretty much all you had. You didn't have broadband, you didn't have fiber links, you didn't have big internet connections. The way that it should be done nowadays is that it's all automated. So you have your initial backup of the system, which is your system state and all your files. And then throughout the day, you should be doing what's called an incremental backup. So you're not backing everything up 3 times a day, for example. You're backing up what's changed, but it's done in a clever way that, one, compresses the data, so we're not transporting and having to store a lot of information on disks. And it's done in a manner that is monitored and maintained. So we monitor all of our customers' backups, and as part of our daily checks, we make sure that all the backups are working, because there's a lot of companies out there that have policies in place and do back up, but are they tested and monitored every day? I know for a fact that some of them aren't. what we're able to do is firstly monitor to see if there's any issues and then proactively resolve them, so we're not having to cross our fingers and hope for the best when it comes to do a data restore. But also we've got a automated disaster recovery. So we've got automated, sorry, it's the joys of having loads of devices connected. People are still calling me. So we have an automated disaster recovery process, which effectively what it allows us to do is test the backup environment, and it produces that server in a virtual environment and sends us an email and shows us that backup of that server, we can boot the server okay, and all the systems and services on it work. So it's important to have your disaster recovery plan, and as part of that, it's really important to make sure you're testing those backups to give you that confidence that you can restore from them.
And how long should a backup take? Is it, is it nowadays something that's, as you say, Margaret in accounts has to sit there and do for half a day, or is it something that can be done remotely and left to get on with it, Lee?
A good system should be something that's deployed and is monitored, and people there at the site don't have to interact with it in any way. So we back up systems literally around the globe, and we're not in front of the machines. We monitor it, we keep an eye on it. It can be done remotely. In terms of how long it takes, obviously depends how much data you've got. The more data, the longer it takes.
Yes,
but it's nowadays there's no excuse to not have a slick and automated backup process in place, because the technology certainly exists.
Brilliant. That's been so helpful, Lee, and I think it's some important messages for us all, particularly as we head towards. I keep coming back to Christmas. We talk, this time when perhaps we're leaving our offices, sort of empty for the Christmas period. I hope many of us are. It's also, I guess, about making sure we've left our systems secure and in the best state. You talk about the incident on the screen there, Lee. That was on a Friday evening, did you say, going into a Saturday?
That was on the early hours of Saturday morning, like 3 a.m., which is why there wasn't there was very few people on the industrial estate. God forbid that it happened during the week, because it would have been a very different story.
Yeah. But I guess that also just highlights the importance of making sure your IT, we're not here to talk about electrics today, but your IT system in particular is in a good state of repair. Everything's been left as it should be. Do a visual check before you leave the office on a Friday night and before you go away for Christmas, just making sure everything's as it should be, nothing's overheating. But Lee, in terms of any other good tips, in terms of, I think, small, medium-sized business owners who are perhaps listening to us this lunchtime, if you were to give them a couple of good tips to take away, to think about in their terms of IT, what would they be, and what would you want to share?
I would simply go back to I'd go back to the 4 questions, and effectively ask yourself, where is your data? Where is it stored? What are you doing in order to protect it, whether it's password policies or 2-form factor, etc. And how is it backed up, and what is the disaster recovery scenario for if something was to go wrong? As business owners, it's something that we should all have knowledge of, and also encourage our management team to have knowledge of, because without knowing the answers to those simple questions, it's not something that we would be able to react to should we need to in any way.
And that sort of leads me into my final thought, really, in terms of, if you don't know the answer to those 4 questions, do 1 or 2 things. I would suggest some sort of an IT audit, sort of challenge yourself on those questions, try and think, well, where is my data? How's it secured, etc. But also, you've got your details early on the screen. Just as I was about to say, my next suggestion would be to make contact with yourself and your colleagues at Meta Eagle. You'll be able to give some great advice, tips, and ideas. And I'm sure I don't want to sort of speak on your behalf, but that initial conversation, will cost nothing, just to have that conversation, see where people are at and how you can support going forwards.
Certainly. I mean, we like I said at the beginning, we're in the nature of understanding someone's business. So until we have a conversation with them, we've got no idea what would be right. We don't simply just cookie cut all of it. So in terms of a conversation, please reach out. One thing that we always do is we offer a free IT site audit as well, where we will actually come out and have a look at IT systems and assess what may well be the IT roadmap that's needed.
Brilliant. Well, it's been absolutely fantastic having you with us for yet another Lunch and Learn, Lee. And I know Simon and Claire and Jasvir and others have been asking lots of questions. It's been good to get those tips and those advice. And I think it's really, thought provoking just to chat, as you say, those questions, those simple questions. Where is our data? How is it being secured? And that what if question, I think, is really important. What if the worst thing was to happen? What's your business continuity plan? What do you have in place? And that's where we're all so reliant on IT, aren't we? But we also, myself included, all are guilty of taking it for granted and assuming that every time we open our laptop, it's going to work. Every time we open our laptop, the data is going to be where we want it to be, and no one else has accessed it. It's just about making sure we've got everything in place, and we're constantly questioning ourselves about what if and where and how can I make things and improve my IT infrastructure in my business. And think about where your business might be in a year's time. What do you need to change now? And what's your plan for the next 12 months in terms of your IT strategy, taking it forward, improving, and making sure you've got the right systems that will work for your business. And as you said early on, Lee, keeping it, yourself ahead of the game or at the forefront in any particular industry, whether you're a florist taking orders online and processing them, whether you're an IT company, whether you're a manufacturer, whatever industry you're in, service or product, make sure you've got best use of your IT. And I go back to some of our previous Lunch and Learn guests, Kaneo talking about systemization links so well to what you've been saying about, getting the right IT in place. You can then look at how you can systemize your business using the IT. And also our listener, Claire, who was with us earlier on, talking about making sure IT is working hand in hand with your HR department in terms of policies and procedures.
Indeed.
The one thing I love about these Lunch and Learns, they all interweave and work together so well, not necessarily by design, but the questions that are coming up. And I should say absolutely by design, but wouldn't be taking ownership in working in the most transparent way. But no, absolutely. There are so many aspects of our business that are so well interlinked, and we need to make sure as business owners that we've got a grip and a handle on all of them. And I do appreciate, as small business owners, sometimes they are the head of IT, they are the head of HR, they are the head of marketing. And that's where it comes to looking outside of your organization and seeing who else can support you. And the likes of yourself, Lee, in terms of Meta Eagle, being able to give that expert outside advice to any business owner is so crucial. So,
well, this is it. I mean, and I'm in exactly the same position. You have to manage the accounts, you have to manage the HR policies, and you're spinning many different plates. And just to sort of tie it off with a conversation I had last week, we were doing some consultancy with a client, and the owner of the company is actually really technical. He's got a lot of IT knowledge, and he set a lot of it up himself. And I simply just put the question of, okay, so how to do all this stuff. You've done it. You've been there. You've done it, and it's working. But could you be better using your time elsewhere? They are in a nature of their time is directly translatable to billable hours. So I was like, well, if you're not messing around creating email accounts and building laptops and doing this and doing that, you could be out actually generating more revenue. And he was like, yeah, that's exactly where we want to be. And this is exactly why we're having a discussion with you, because it's not necessarily something I have time to do. I've got an interest in it and I know how to do it, but I haven't got the time. There's more important things I need to be doing as a business owner. So yeah, it's outsourcing the bits that one perhaps that you can't do because you don't have the knowledge, or even if you do, is it something you really want to be utilizing your time doing?
Absolutely. And we talk about that in many of our workshops and masterclasses, putting a value on your time and your own expertise. If you can get somebody else to do something for more effectively, more skillfully, and for less money than you perhaps be paying yourself to do it, then think about who else can support your organization externally. Say everyone, HR support, IT support. You pay an accountant. You wouldn't do your own accounts necessarily for your business, so why do your own IT, own HR? If there's somebody out there that can do it better and more effectively and quicker, then I implore you to think about who else can support your business. And if you are one of those people right now who's spinning lots of plates, who isn't quite sure which plate to take off and to look at next, we'd love to have a conversation with you. This afternoon is one of many days when we've got a 6 steps business health check taking place at 1:30, and we run those on a regular basis just to work with business owners to look at all aspects of the business. Think, where are you doing, where you've got your challenges, where have you got your success, what have your successes been, and what areas do you need to focus on as you go into 2021? So we'd love to have a conversation with you here at Action Coach if you are spinning lots of plates and think, how can I free up some time, and what do I need to focus on as we go into the new year? So if you'd like to have a conversation with Lee about your IT, with ourselves about those spinning plates and what we can do to work together to help you prepare and be in the very best place for 2021, please do get in touch. For now, we've got only a few minutes left, Lee, so I'd just say thank you again for joining us this Lunch and Learn. It's been great having you, and I do hope you'll be able to join us again in the new year. We'll look at getting our diaries together and seeing when we can get you back here, Lee, for another Lunch and Learn, and perhaps think about IT into the next, I was going to say 21st century, but into 2021. We're already in the 21st century, but into 2021.
Yeah, I was going to say we're already in the 21st century, but thanks for having me back, Steve. It's been absolutely great, and thanks to all of those that attended and engaged with some questions.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again, Lee. And, to all our listeners, we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. We have James Bowl talking all about purpose. What is your purpose? What is your why? Why do you differentiate yourself, or how can you differentiate yourself from your competitors? And another great Lunch and Learn to be listening to as we head towards the end of this year and prepare for the next year ahead. So what makes you different in your market, in your industry? So a great Lunch and Learn, 12 o'clock. Thursday lunchtime. But for now, Lee, it's been great having you with us. We look forward to catching up very soon and having that physical beer rather than the virtual conversations we've had for the last 6 months. So I look forward to seeing you soon.
Very much.
And to all our listeners, have a great day, and we'll see you on Thursday. Take care now.